This is Datto Does Destiny, and what I have for you today is a damage test video for Garden of Salvation. Today we'll be testing an assortment of weapons against the final boss of Garden of Salvation to find out what you should and should not be using. While this test probably could have been performed more easily or reliably on previous raid bosses, I wanted to stick with testing on the Sanctified Mind to simulate what actual gameplay will be like. If you just want to get to the numbers, hit the Wadsworth constant on this video. As usual, these tests were done using no buffs at all to get the purest form of damage. Most weapons were used at 950, and if not, they were within 3 levels of that. So I do not expect the difference between a 947 and a 950 weapon's performance to be of any significance. We did mess around with Enhanced Relay Defender, the results of which I can elaborate on at the end of the video. With the removal of auto-reload effects from Lunafaction Boots and Rally Barricade, this means that grenade launchers took a step down, but only slightly, as Spike Grenade auto-reloading holster grenade launchers can simulate the auto-reload experience to a slight degree. Thus, the theory is to use a grenade launcher, swap to another weapon for a short time like a sniper, and then swap back to a grenade launcher with it being fully reloaded. We're going to test this against some other high-tier options. First, let's talk about some stuff that you maybe don't need to bother with. The first thing I can safely recommend you not bother with is swords. Swords had some buzz pre-Shadowkeep, and perhaps they're good on other targets, I haven't done much testing on them, but on the Sanctified Mind itself, swords are inconsistent at best and horrifically bad at worst, at least when trying to spam the bigger attacks. The second thing I can safely recommend to not use is maybe one you might not expect. Anarchy. While using one Anarchy tether point on the boss works fine, as soon as you attach another to the boss or to the ground, the boss becomes immune to Anarchy. This is what originally was supposed to enable firing line snipers to be one of the go-to items for boss damage. Without Anarchy working on the boss, well, that doesn't really work out. Anarchy does work on the Consecrated Mind though, but I really wouldn't recommend a firing line sniper for the Consecrated Mind. Anarchy could theoretically work on this boss if there happens to be really specific locations for where you should plant the tethers on the boss, but I did not test every single combination of anchor point locations. Following those, Deathbringer is probably not worth your time either, along with Truth or Wardcliff Coil, although Coil wouldn't be the worst thing you could equip if you're standing close enough. I didn't test Legend of Acreus because you'd never be able to reasonably use it on the Sanctified Mind, although you could technically use it on the Consecrated Mind, but I really wouldn't recommend it there either. I also did not test Divinity since I was going to make it its own video, but since it was announced that it's not supposed to stack with other debuffs, this will hopefully just be treated as a regular boss debuff in the future. Then we have some of the so-so, it's okay but nothing spectacular stuff, along with the okay, not bad but not the best kind of stuff. These things include, but are not limited to, Sleeper Simulant, Thunderlord, Wavesplitter, Coldheart, Two-Tailed Fox, and 1000 Voices. These weapons did respectable damage, but unfortunately are all exotics, meaning we lose room for Izanagi's Burden, and as you can imagine, Izanagi's Burden will take a lot of our focus in this video, along with Whisper of the Worm. Darcy was also tested, and while its DPS was high, the reload cuts down on it quite a bit, which is a problem that most 140 RPM snipers will see. High DPS, low total damage. However, with Rally Barricade, its DPS is respectable. The Sanctified Mind is an interesting boss in that one team of 3 people, assuming you do 2 breaks, has a lot of extra time to deal damage to the boss. For the purposes of this video, our damage phase will start when the boss lands on the ground after the second team has done their break. The boss stays on the ground for about 10 seconds, occasionally strafing and moving, followed by an animation to float up into the air and then staying in the air for another 9 to 10 seconds. The float animation is about 2 seconds long, and the boss can technically still be damaged during this animation, it's just harder to hit the boss while it's moving. I imagine most players will deal damage while the boss is grounded, then wait until the boss stops moving after the floating animation to resume their damage again. The boss also has a crit spot that just sometimes doesn't want to give you that crit, which will also be a factor. However, if your entire team is equipped with enhanced relay defender mods in every slot for a 5 times bonus, then you might opt for a 1 break damage cycle instead. Team A would do their break, Team B would set up shop by their relay, ward, well, debuffs, and then Team A would join them. Relay and enhanced relay defender buffs seem to stack up multiplicatively. 1 regular is a 5% bonus in damage, while 1 enhanced is 10%. 5 enhanced gives you not 50% bonus damage, but 61%. This massive boost in damage enables you to one-cycle the boss as long as you bring the right buffs and debuffs. For the purposes of this video though, I'll assume that you're doing a 2 break damage cycle, and then once your team is equipped enough, you can graduate to the 1 break cycle to hopefully one-cycle the boss. Well, let's finally get into the thick of it, and I'm going to warn you now, things get very nitpicky later on. Whisper of the Worm deals 59,347 damage on a crit with Whispered Breathing and the Catalyst active. At a rate of 72 RPM, Whisper does 71,216 DPS, assuming we never miss and we shoot the gun forever. Whisper can store 18 shots, 21 with a reserve perk, and 23 with 2 reserves. It'll take just over 14 seconds to shoot 18 shots, about 17 seconds to shoot 21, and just over 18 for 23. In every instance, we have enough time to fire all of those shots, although the 23 shots will cut it really close because we do have to proc Whispered Breathing, which takes 2 seconds, but for the purposes of this video, we'll say that you can do it. Just remember that the auto reload on Whisper requires rapid crits. So, a simulation of perfect Whisper shooting would result in the following. With our timer starting on the first shot, 23 shots would happen in 18.33 seconds, meaning we would deal 1,364,981 damage in that amount of time for a DPS of 74,453, assuming we never miss. This is a simulated number, but would I be surprised if someone could hit 23 shots in a row? Absolutely not. It's just a little difficult because you have to fire close to the maximum rate of fire the entire time. But it's also difficult because for the first half of the damage phase, the boss is just moving a lot, and any number of factors could mess up your shot, causing you to reload manually. A reload is fine, but proccing Whispered Breathing is the real killer. From reload to Whispered Breathing with a rally barricade is a time loss of about 4.33 seconds. So every time you need to reload, you lose 4.33 seconds of damage time, which is the equivalent of 5.2 shots worth of damage, call it 5 shots, or in damage terms, almost 300,000 damage. Oof. Realistically, I don't think the average player is going to get in 23 Whispered crits on this boss, mainly because of the first half of damage where the boss is moving and shooting you. The second half of the damage phase is where the boss is almost perfectly still with an easy crit spot for 9.5 seconds approximately, which gives time for at most 12 Whispered shots or 712,164 damage, assuming you're shooting as the boss is floating into position. Okay. Let's move on for a little bit to find a competitor for Whisper, like, oh, I don't know, Izanagi's Burden. Izanagi's Burden with the Catalyst and Honed Edge ×4 deals 147,529 damage. Izanagi's Burden holds 20 shots with no reserves, meaning you can shoot 5 of these shots before running out of ammo, but 24 shots with 2 reserves, meaning you can get a 6th shot, and that 6th shot will be a difference maker. You can technically get a 7th shot with a 3x bonus if you get Honed Edge ×4 and then scoop up more ammo, but to keep it simple, we'll just say you get 6 shots. With no reload speed bonuses, 5 shots takes about 12.5 seconds to do. With Rally, it takes about 9.5 seconds. 6 shots would be about 15.6 seconds or 11.66 seconds with Rally. Those 5 shots will get us 737,645 damage, and if it takes 12.5 seconds to do that, we're looking at a DPS of 59,000 without Rally, and DPS of 77,647 with Rally. 6 shots is 885,000 damage, or 56,741 DPS without Rally, and 75,915 DPS with. While you do have enough time to hit 5 shots while the boss is floating, it cuts it close, but for the sake of simulations, we'll say that it is reasonable to accomplish this. This leaves almost the entire first half of the damage phase to deal damage with something else, maybe a grenade launcher. So let's compare Whisper to Izanagi during the boss's safe damage phase, which is the second half of the damage phase, which is about 9.5 seconds. We said you could do 5 Izanagi shots with Rally or 12 Whispered Breathing shots. Izanagi does 737,000, Whispered does 712,000, for a difference of 25,000 damage in favor of Izanagi. Is that a massive difference? No, and in normal cases I'd say that this is basically a wash. The consequences of missing once are as follows. Izanagi would deal 590,000 damage instead of 737,000. Whisper, on the other hand, it matters when you miss. If you miss in the middle of the phase, then you're missing 4.33 seconds of damage at least, plus the missed shot, which means we just lost half of our damage. You would need to hit 10 crits with Whisper to match 1 missed Izanagi's. 2 missed Izanagis means you need to hit about 7 to 8 shots to match. So missing with Whisper seems way more brutal than missing once with Izanagis. In fact, you can miss twice with Izanagis and still be ahead. Or can you? You see, you don't always need to go for Whispered Breathing. If we just start shooting without Whispered Breathing, we'll be dealing more damage than Whispered Breathing up until 6.2 seconds go by, which is 8 shots of non-Whispered or 6 of Whispered. So if you have less than 6.2 seconds to shoot something with Whisper, it's actually higher total damage to just not proc Whispered Breathing. If the boss is in the air, then if you miss at any point, you should just reload and shoot ASAP. If the boss is on the ground still, then it's probably worth proccing Whispered Breathing again to have it for the full air phase. So let's say you miss with Whisper in the air phase, and after the 6th shot you take, you gotta reload. Non-breathing damage on a shot is 44,000. Let's say it takes 3 seconds to reload and get your bearings. We're left with about 2 seconds left of damage in that case, where we can squeak out 3 more shots. That's another 132,000 damage, as opposed to waiting for Whispered Breathing, where we might not even get any shots in at all, maybe 1. Adding up the crits from before, we get 428,000 damage, which more or less matches missing 2 shots with Izanagi's. What the hell does this all mean, Datto? Shut up! Tell me the answers. Here's what it means. Whisper versus Izanagi's, purely in the second half of the damage phase, comes down to if you miss with Whisper or if you don't. And if you do miss, when you miss, which is impossible to calculate for this test. Izanagi versus Whisper with no missing, Izanagi's is ahead by a little bit. If you miss with Whisper early, it is a brutal damage loss. But now we need to calculate what's going on in the first half. If you're using Izanagi's, you're probably using a grenade launcher in the heavy slot, but we also have that 6th shot to account for. Whisper of the Worm players will want to be trying to crit the entire time, but Izanagi's will just run out of ammo if we shoot early, so we need something else here. Now, I did have a section on 90 RPM snipers with Firing Line Tranquility and Soul Survivor in the first cut of this video, but I took it out because it just didn't feel that important to the DPS discussions, because legendary 90 RPM sniper DPS completely relies on how many perks you had that made it so you didn't have to reload. Their DPS is pretty respectable, like 61,500 for Trank with Firing Line and 58,500 for Soul Survivor with Firing Line, but that DPS is only for as long as you don't have to reload, and you will have to reload at some point. Firing Line snipers felt like they were going to be the plan if Anarchy worked on this boss, but it doesn't seem like it does. Again, unless there's a part of the boss's body where Anarchy just happens to work and I didn't shoot it. So, let's talk about grenade launchers now. 150 RPM grenade launchers are going to be good here, and we'll throw in Wendigo because of exploding light, although 120 RPM grenade launchers aren't that bad either. The main perks we're going to be looking for in a grenade launcher is not only spike nade, but also full court for the purposes of this boss. You could also get spike with auto-loading, field prep. The god roll would be auto-load, full court, and spike, which I think can only roll on a Doomsday 120 RPM GL from Reckoning, so good luck with that. Full court gets its largest benefit because the boss is so far away. In fact, a spike nade full court love and death grenade launcher was doing slightly over 30,000 damage a shot at max range, which is a smidge more than my explosive light Wendigo shot of 29,700 if I hit the boss perfectly. What do I mean by perfectly? Well, something to keep in mind with the Sanctified Mind is that the crit spot technically also applies for grenade launchers, but only a certain portion of their damage. Grenade launcher damage is split into two: direct impact and then the explosion. Watch here. The less accurate I am with my grenade launcher shot towards the boss's crit, the less damage it ends up dealing. In Wendigo's case, it can be very significant depending on how inaccurate you were. If only slightly, then it's only a 2,000 damage penalty. If off by a lot, it could be half your damage. Love and Death's penalty was about 6,000 damage if you missed the crit spot. An example of Love and Death with full court and spike nades at maximum distance and highest accuracy is as follows. 30,544 damage per shot at 2.5 shots per second is 76,360 DPS if we're just going infinitely. Unfortunately, Love and Death cannot roll with auto-loading holster, so that changes things, mainly lowering our DPS. As soon as you start to manually reload, our DPS goes down. Wendigo on a perfect shot is 29,724 damage with explosive light. As soon as you lose explosive light though, our DPS drops big time. But that particular roll, full court and spike nades, seems to be the key to beating Wendigo's explosive light potential. Now the question is, which is actually better? A Wendigo with on and off explosive light with no reload thanks to auto reloading, or a Love and Death god roll with manually reloading? Well, I'm going to throw a bunch of numbers at the screen and find out. Wendigo, starting with 6 explosive light and ending with 1 non-explosive, which takes 3 seconds, then we shoot something else until we auto reload, then another 7 non-explosive shots, which takes another 3 seconds, gives us a grand total of 358,984 damage, divided by 6 seconds for 59,830 DPS for purely Wendigo damage only. The 6 seconds is simulated. In reality, swapping your weapons and adjusting your shot after coming back to the gun is going to be more like 7 to 8 seconds, and even that's being a little generous, which would be in between 45 and 51,000 DPS. Love and Death, firing 6 shots, reloading, and then another 6, gives us 366,528 damage in 7.9 seconds for DPS of 46,395. But we have no reload speed boost for this. If we factor in a rally barricade, which boosts our reload speed from 3.5 to 2.3 seconds, our DPS is 54,705. If we shot another magazine, we would have 549,792 damage in 11.4 seconds, or 48,227 DPS. Again, these numbers are simulated perfection. In reality, we'd have adjustments to make. We would miss shots because of boss movement or flinch. We would take extra time. If we add on an extra second or two like we did with Wendigo, our DPS would fall somewhere in between 42,129 and 47,601 for 2 magazines worth of damage, which is a little bit lower than Wendigo's range. Again, in reality, things are going to happen that cause your damage to vary. Missed shots, not full damage shots, delays in shooting, rebuffing yourself, repositioning. As a result of that, I feel like it's not a terrible thing to say that the differences between these 2 grenade launchers are not going to be significant enough to have a large impact on your damage capabilities. But let's get optimal for the sake of argument. We have god tier aim with all weapons. We literally never miss, and we do maximum damage every time. Basically, you're me. Nice one, Datto. Thanks. What's better, Whisper or Izanagi's and Wendigo? The answer is Whisper of the Worm by the slightest of margins, like 50,000 damage. If you used 6 Izanagi shots and 17 Wendigo shots, 6 of them explosive light, you would deal 1,311,898 damage, compared to 23 Whispered Breathing shots of 1,364,981 damage. Is 50,000 damage going to be a difference maker? Probably not, very small chance. That being said, these are simulated numbers. They assume perfect shooting, perfect damage on grenade shots, no misses, absolute perfection. If you don't have a rally barricade, then sure, Whisper might be the play, but if you're not consistent with your shots, it might not be. So, realistically, either of the options is going to be fine. It's more of a pick your poison kind of deal. But missing a crit with Whisper during any time other than the very end of the damage phase will cost you big time, on top of the fact that it's difficult to hit 23 crits without having to reload, which is why I would probably sway towards Izanagi's with the Catalyst and a grenade launcher with a 2x Sniper Reserve setup over something like Whisper of the Worm. The reason I did not mention something like auto-loading Spike Grenade Swarm of the Raven is because damage values were inconsistent. This could have been due to the crit spot issue or some other issue, but it's most likely fine to swap that in for Wendigo if you have it, and if it does have consistent damage, could potentially generate higher total damage than Wendigo. This would make Izanagi's and Swarm of the Raven better than Whisper in simulations and in reality. I emphasized Wendigo because there is a direct path to the weapon, and it's relatively easy to get, whereas with random roll items, you need to get lucky. I do realize that this is also the case with Love and Death, but I really just wanted to try out full court on this boss. If you're going for the enhanced relay defender times 5, everyone buffed, 1 break, 1 cycle maneuver, well, according to some very rough calculations, the boss has about 10.14 million health, give or take. If you have Weapons of Light, a boss debuff, and 5 times enhanced relay, the boss will die in about 61 Whispered Breathing crits, or about 25 Izanagi's times 4 crits with the Catalyst. That would mean about 10 Whispered shots per player, or 4 Izanagi's per player, with one person doing 5, or just have the whole team doing some grenade launcher damage as well. Both of these are reasonable to accomplish. Season 8 will see the removal of Oppressive Darkness, which means a Quiver Hunter, or just 2 hunters using Shadow Shot, will be needed to replace the debuff, or Divinity, but that would require players to hit more Izanagi shots. However, this boss has a 2x crit multiplier already, and hitting the Divinity crit spot on bosses with this kind of multiplier, like this boss, actually causes you to do less damage than you normally would. There's a whole bunch of wonky stuff with Divinity on Sanctified Mind, so for now, I'm just going to say avoid using Divinity on this boss to keep it simple, but on Consecrated Mind, go nuts. And that is what I have for you. If you don't happen to have those exotics, then you're going to be looking for stuff like Tranquility with auto-loading and firing line, along with some form of a good grenade launcher. Swarm of the Raven with auto-loading, Wendigo, even Prospector without auto-reload deals good damage. If you enjoyed this video, a positive rating is appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.